Actual Practice Test 3. Listen to a conversation between a student and a professor. Professor Blair, may I come in?
Oh, sure, Gary. How are things going? I thought you'd be very busy with your final research project.
Yes, actually, I need some help with the project, and I was wondering if you could help me.
No problem. I understand learning about conducting an interview and doing a real one are quite different.
Oh, it's not that. I think I can easily interview somebody because I was a reporter for my school newspaper back in high school. I've done plenty of interviews before.
Well, good for you. So what's the problem?
I just can't... I can't seem to find anyone worthwhile to interview. The subject should be a successful business person, and unfortunately, there's nobody like that around me. So I was sort of hoping you could introduce me to someone you know.
But I can't help you with that. Part of the assignment is finding an appropriate interview subject and then convincing them to meet with you. So it wouldn't be fair to the other students if I help you with that.
Yes, I understand, but what am I supposed to do now?
I'll give you some advice. Don't try to find the right subject among your acquaintances.
Oh, okay, but how can I meet somebody I don't know?
Why don't you buy a local newspaper and flip through all the articles? When you find a story about a business person who is doing something noteworthy, contact them about an interview.
Someone from the newspaper? If somebody is famous enough to have articles written about them in the newspaper, I'm pretty sure they'll be too busy to talk to some college student.
I think you should be more positive, Gary. Most people would be glad to give half an hour of their time to a young student who looks up to them. I think they'd be flattered. What's the worst that could happen?
Well, they could say no.
Exactly. And if they do, you just thank them politely and then try someone else. Well, if you are still nervous, remember this could be a great opportunity for you. You've mentioned in the past that you want to get involved in business, haven't you?
I sure have. I plan on owning my own small business by the time I'm 30.
That's a great goal to have. And if you interview one of our community's business leaders, you'll have a chance to learn all kinds of things about what it takes to be successful.
I guess you're right.
Now grab a newspaper and get started. You don't want to fall behind on the assignment.
All right, I will. Thanks for the encouragement, Professor Blair.
That's what I'm here for. I'm looking forward to reading your interview.
Number 1. Why does the student visit his professor? Number 2. Why does the student mention his high school newspaper? Number 3. What is the student's research project? Number 4. How is the student's attitude toward searching through a newspaper changed? Listen again to part of the conversation. Then answer the question.
Well, if you are still nervous, remember this could be a great opportunity for you. You've mentioned in the past that you want to get involved in business, haven't you?
I sure have. I plan on owning my own small business by the time I'm 30.
That's a great goal to have. And if you interview one of our community's business leaders, you'll have a chance to learn all kinds of things about what it takes to be successful.
Number 5. What can be inferred about the professor? Listen to part of a lecture in a business class. Well, let's move on to another behavioral leadership model, the managerial grid. It uses 2 fundamental aspects, people and production, to define 5 basic managerial styles. In other words, this model categorizes leadership styles based on whether the leader's concern is for relationships with other people or for production. Now, don't be confused. It's not about whether the leaders succeed in tasks or relationships, just about what they focus on more, okay? Let's study the first type of leaders who have high scores in production and low in people. We call these task-oriented people, authoritarian leaders, or sometimes producer-parish style. They only concentrate on how to produce more and how to produce well, but they don't care about how to deal with people. I believe you guys fully understand that leaders of this type are hard on their workers. They expect people to do what they are told without any questions or debate. It means there is no allowance for collaboration, so it is difficult for subordinates to contribute to development. What's worse, when they face trouble, they look for who's to blame rather than the solution to or prevention of the problem. Okay, next one. Well, let's guess the title of this type of leader who has low scores on production and depends very highly on people at the same time. Guess what? They are referred to as country club leaders. Well, I thought this was a perfect name because these managers pay too much attention to the security and comfort of the employees. So the atmosphere is usually friendly, but not necessarily productive. It's because they sometimes fail to employ coercive and legitimate power to accomplish goals for fear of jeopardizing relationships with other team members. Now, we have the impoverished leader type, and this type of manager is not committed to either production or people. It is said that managers use this style to avoid getting into trouble. The main concern for this type of manager is not to be held responsible for any mistakes, so they look more like inactive and lazy. I'm not judging them, but in this case, we could hardly expect that the business will progress. Maybe you can guess the type in the middle. This type is called the middle-of-the-road style, and this kind of leader seems to try to balance between company goals and workers' needs. By giving some concern to both people and production, the leaders hope to achieve acceptable performance. So at first it appears to be an ideal compromise. There is a problem, though. When they compromise, they necessarily give away a bit of each concern so that neither production nor people needs are fully met. Finally, we have the most desirable leaders, aka team leaders. They have high orientation scores in both people and production, which means they stress production needs and the needs of the people equally highly. They encourage the workers to reach team goals as effectively as possible while also working to strengthen the bonds among the team members. As a result, they usually form and lead the most productive teams. Number 6. What is the lecture mainly about? Number 7. What are the two dimensions to identify leader styles in the managerial grid? Click on two answers. Number 8. Which of the following is not mentioned as a characteristic of authoritarian leaders? Number 9. What can be inferred about middle-of-the-road leaders? Number 10. According to the professor, which leadership styles are the least and most successful? Listen again to part of the lecture, then answer the question. Okay, next one. Well, let's guess the title of this type of leader who has low scores on production and depends very highly on people at the same time. Guess what? They are referred to as country club leaders. Well, I thought this was a perfect name because these managers pay too much attention to the security and comfort of the employees. Number 11. What can be inferred about the professor? Listen to part of a lecture in a botany class.
Let's change the subject for a bit and take a few minutes to talk about some flowers that were found in New Jersey a few years back. Now, finding flowers in New Jersey probably doesn't sound like a big deal to you, but these flowers are special because they were fossilized. They were, discovered in an ancient marsh that is now a clay pit and are estimated to be about 90 million years old. And amazingly, fossils from more than 200 species of flowers were found at the site. It's more than what has been found anywhere else on Earth. Most of them are ancestors of the flowers that inhabit the Earth today. All right, these were really rare findings because, first of all, most botanists don't normally expect to find fossilized flowers. Generally, flowers are considered too fragile to last that long. And since nobody was really looking for them, the fossilized flowers could easily have gone undetected.
Excuse me, Professor. If flowers are so fragile, how did these ones become fossils? I mean, was it something special about the flowers themselves, or was it the marsh that preserved them?
That's a good guess, but I have to say there is no difference between ancient flowers or marshes and those of today. Well, actually, the reason these particular flowers survived intact for so long is that before they were fossilized, they were charcoalified. That means they were burned by intense heat, most likely a forest fire, which turned them into charcoal. This made them hard and waterproof, allowing them to be preserved without rotting away. After the fire, they were probably washed into the marsh by rain, and sank to the bottom where they were preserved in the mud. Over millions of years, the mud hardened into rock and they became fossils. There is also another reason why fossilized flowers are so scarce, and that's their size. Ancient flowers were not like flowers we see growing today. They were quite small. Some of them were actually no bigger than a tiny dot, unless you had a microscope. You might not even know they were flowers. We're not sure why they were so small. It may be that they evolved into bigger sizes later on, or that they simply shrank during the fossilization process. Anyway, an important aspect of this discovery is that it included fossils of the insects that pollinated the flowers, as well as some of the pollen itself. Pollination is an essential step not only in the reproduction of plants, but also for flower evolution. That's because flowers themselves have evolved to attract insect pollinators. Moreover, the pollinators have contributed to evolution through genetic recombination within a dispersed plant population. Accordingly, the fossils found in New Jersey have given scientists a better understanding of the relationship between flowers and insects and how they evolved together over time. In addition, we can assume that insects were a driving force behind the tremendous diversity of flowering plants.
Number 12. What is the lecture mainly about? Number 13. According to the professor, why are fossilized flowers so rare? Click on 2 answers. Number 14. What does the professor say about the charcoalified process? Number 15. According to the professor, what are the possible explanations for the small size of flower fossils? Click on 2 answers. Number 16. Why does the professor mention insects inside flower fossils? Listen again to part of the lecture, then answer the question.
Excuse me, Professor. If flowers are so fragile, how did these ones become fossils? I mean, was it something special about the flowers themselves, or was it the marsh that preserved them?
That's a good guess, but I have to say there is no difference between ancient flowers or marshes and those of today.
Number 17. What can be inferred about the professor?